Hello and welcome back to So You Got a Life Sci Degree. We're your hosts, Lisa and Frida, two life sci undergrad students trying to navigate our future careers. This is episode 7, and we're talking to Talia Asa about her position as a high school math teacher. How are you doing, Frida?
Generally pretty good, but I've definitely had an intense last 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, so I'm just continuously surprised at how much you can get done under pressure.
Isn't there that song that kind of goes like, da, 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 under pressure?
Oh yeah, that's the Queen song. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. My mind
Yeah.
categorized that as some kind of new agey pop song, but yeah, no, tell me, so what have you been getting done under pressure, you little cooker?
Well, yeah, I had a math midterm last weekend basically, and I basically learned like 2 months worth of calculus in like 2 weeks.
I feel like I have less ability than the average person to do things in a short period of time. Like, I feel like I literally couldn't do that. So, like,
Yeah,
you know.
but you're also great at like, dealing with that and scheduling things early and getting them actually done.
That's true, perhaps.
Yeah, and I remember like when we were talking about this, I kept asking you about this, and you're like, okay, I think I just have a good ability to like when I do procrastinate productively.
So
And so, yeah, I think this semester, it's not necessarily that my overall procrastination has reduced, but I think I've gotten so much better at procrastinating productively. Besides my math, I got pretty much everything else done. So I just like could dedicate basically 2 weeks to doing math. So yeah, I mean it's improvement. We're definitely not there yet, but
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like last night I was gonna hand in my computer science assignment for this week, and then I ended up 30 minutes before the deadline deleting the script. It was really bad, yeah. And then I was like with my friend and I like freaked out in front of him, which was a little bit embarrassing. But yeah, we're good now, so hopefully.
Well, rest in peace to the first edition of Frida's command line script.
Yeah.
And yeah, well wishes to the second edition.
Yeah. How's your week been?
I mean, as usual, I have less of a general life update and more of just a cute little anecdote. I feel like the listeners over time are going to get more and more invested in your actual life in terms of what's going on bi-weekly in your world. Whereas for me, their impression of me is just going to be a random jumble of like weird things I've done and squirrel facts. And so to add on to that, I was in my room, and I live at home, by the way, in Mississauga, so suburban house, and I was just doing my work, and like in front of my desk are my windows, and then I kind of look up a little, and lo and behold, there is a fluffy gray squirrel, like right in my line of view on our roof. And I was looking at him and I was like, what are you doing here, buddy? This is too much. Like, I know you're like colonizing the urban habitat, but there is a limit to this. And I watched his little paws like consider trying to like jump to the tree next to our roof. And then he kind of scurried closer to me and I was like, oh my God, is he going to do it? Is he going to run right past my window? But I think he was following the trail of the storm system, like the storm drain system. Yeah. And so he kind of scuttled off to the side of the house and out of my sight of view. But that was just, I never thought they could go on roofs, but appears they are continuing to increase their abilities. So yeah, that was probably the most interesting thing about my week. I am super excited to talk to Talia, though.
Yeah, it's kind of weird calling her Talia, like calling your high school teachers by their first name. Wild.
It is super weird. I mean, literally back there, I almost said Miss Asa, but yeah, for the listeners, Talia, Miss Asa, was my grade 11 biology teacher at White Oaks Secondary School. She was working there at the time. And I really loved all my high school teachers at White Oaks, including her. So yeah, that's kind of how we were able to interview her. You wanted to go do that right now?
Yeah, let's get into it. Talia is currently a math teacher at Abbey Park High School. She completed her undergraduate degree in biochemistry and genetics at Western University in London, Ontario. After that, she did a master's degree at McMaster University, where she investigated the epigenetic regulation of telomeres. Following this, she obtained her Bachelor of Education from the University of Toronto and became a licensed Ontario teacher. Thank you for joining us today, Talia.
Thank you for having me.
So, to kick things off, the first thing we wanted to ask you was if you could just give us a brief overview of what your job is, maybe what kinds of subjects you teach, and kind of the grade levels you interact with.
So I am able to teach grades, I think it's 7 through 12, but I teach at a high school. So I teach grades 9 to 12. For the past number of years, I've mostly taught math, but I have taught a fair number of science courses in the past. So I've taught grade 11 and 12 chemistry, grade 9 science, grade 10 applied science, and IB biology. And since then, I've mostly taught grade 9 and 10 math. And then this year I started teaching grade 12 math.
Yeah, we usually like to ask our guests, like, what does the average day of work look like for you? We've probably all been to high school, so we are most familiar with this. But yeah, what does your day look like? What does your week look like?
So everybody says they've been to high school and they know what high school looks like and what a teacher does. And let me tell you, it's not what you expect. So going into this job, I thought I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. And boy, was I in for an awakening. So school hours are like 8:10 to 2:45. And I typically get to school at around 6:30 and I leave at 3:34. So it's a longer day than most people anticipate, but I love my job, so I'm happy to put the hours in. So I get to work early, and because I teach math, students need lots of extra support. So I usually run math tutorials in the morning before school starts.
Wow.
And that's the part of my job that I absolutely love because I get to interact one-on-one with the students and I get to see their progression and development in math and logical reasoning over the course of the semester. So I get there early, but I do it because I love it and I want to help my students. And I actually get to watch them grow in that period.
Aww.
So a typical school day is 5 periods, and a full-time teacher teaches 3 out of 5 periods a day. So we get 1 lunch and 1 prep period, and everybody knows what that looks like. So when you're in the classroom, I usually do about a 45-minute lesson, and then there's time for students to work on some homework, but the interaction level isn't the same as it is in the morning with the tutorial. So during my lunch period, because I teach math and students need a lot of extra support, we have math help again. So our math teachers run a math clinic and we typically rotate through that. We work one-on-one with everybody's students, but oftentimes math clinic is crazy busy. So more than one teacher is in there helping the students with their homework. Then we have our prep period, and this is time where I get to prepare for my classes, do some photocopying, get some marking done, call parents, speak to guidance about students that are struggling and how we can better support them. And there's lots of other things that gets done behind the scenes, and we do that during prep and or after school.
Okay, that sounds like a busy, busy day. Do you actually feel like your prep periods are like enough to get through all the things that you just listed that you do during a prep period?
I would say more time would always be appreciated. We don't work a 9-to-5 job. So as teachers, we are professionals and we do carry homework and we have to do work outside of the classroom. And so I feel that it's our responsibility to spend time either before school or after school or on weekends, marking, getting ready for class. Like I spend my summers getting ready if I teach a new course. So for example, this year I'm teaching grade 12 math. So I spent my summer preparing my lesson notes and doing all the homework and making sure I was up to date on my content and understanding how I should deliver the material. So I have to do work outside of school hours, but that's my job. I'm a professional. I should have to do work outside of my hours. During COVID and the pandemic, I think teachers are overworked because the school day is not typical. Some teachers are teaching 5 hours of class in a 9-week period, and it's crazy. But during a regular non-pandemic school year, there's homework involved, but it's manageable.
Yeah, and I understand what you mean because I'm working as a TA right now for 1MO3, Biology 1MO3, one of the first year biology courses for Life Sci.
I did
And
that
they
too.
give you did that? You were a 1MO3 TA?
I think so. That's the lab-based course, right?
No, it's not. That was 1AO3.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah. No, but I kind of want to do that one too. But yeah, I'm a TA for 1MO3 and they give you prep time. They give you about 30 minutes of prep time for each week for each tutorial, and yeah, it's definitely not enough time. So usually you end up spending a bit more, but again, it's like I don't mind because I want to give a good tutorial for the students.
It's enough time if you do the bare minimum, but if you want to go above and beyond and do the best job you can, it's probably not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's something I wanted to touch base on more as well, like the idea that a 35-hour work week is enough to do the job, but it's not enough if you want to really excel at the job. But we can touch a bit more on that later. Right now, you mentioned that you are primarily a math teacher and that you've taught some science courses, but your background in terms of your bachelor's and your master's is actually in biology. So I was wondering if you could give us a bit of insight into why you decided to teach math instead of biology, if it had anything to do with your own passions as a teacher, or maybe if it was more in relation to the demand for jobs.
So when I graduated Teachers College, my two teachables were biology and chemistry. And then I was worried at the time that I would not be able to get a job teaching science. So that summer, I did an additional course to allow me to teach math. I got hired initially as a science teacher in the Halton District School Board, and I taught science at the beginning of my career, but I found it boring. Students came in, they would do the lab, they understood the material, they just had to go home and memorize it. And there wasn't a lot of one-on-one interaction with my students, and I didn't feel that I got to know my students in the way that I wanted to. So after I did my master's degree, I actually took a year off work and I did a lot of tutoring, and most of the tutoring I did was math-based tutoring. And that was when I spent time with students and I got to know who they were as learners and what they wanted to do in life. And I developed personal relationships with my students. So I figured at that time, maybe I could get into math. Students need lots of additional support with math, and I would have better relationships with my students. And that was what was important to me as a teacher. It wasn't necessarily about delivering content, but building relationships with my students. So the first year I taught math, I think it was grade 9 academic math. The students in my class were incredibly weak, and that's when I developed a passion to set up morning tutorial sessions to help my students obtain provincial standards on EQAO and to excel in math and be prepared for grade 10 math. And it was during that time where I was able to develop relationships with students, watch them grow, help them. And I felt that sense of reward at the end of the semester that I had really allowed a student to progress through grade 9 math. And I watched the student come into grade 9 with very few numeracy skills and then complete grade 9. And I was so amazed as to the amount of effort that they had put in and impressed with their ability to grow as a student and develop the skills over time. And that's really where my passion for math started. And so it's not that I love to teach math as much as I love to watch the students grow.
Yeah, that's a really good response.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like being on the other side of that, like having had great math teachers and a great high school math experience, like it definitely, I feel like pays off, at least for me. Yeah, so digging a little bit more into like, you know, you said that you were worried about getting a job. And so like you kind of added this skill set of teaching math. Probing more on that, how do you feel about like, you know, the demand for teachers and like getting hired and all of that stuff in Canada and Ontario specifically?
I'm not sure I'm really aware as to what the hiring situation is like. Like when I graduated, there were what they said were very few jobs for teachers. I graduated in June and I was put on a supply list in October, November, and I landed my first job in February of the year I graduated. So I think as long as you push and you have the credentials and you fight for the jobs, they're out there. But you have to visit the schools, you have to interact with the principals, you have to fight, you have to want to teach, and your passion has to come through before the job gets posted so that people know who you are. But I don't know.
That's interesting. I mean, I've definitely heard that it depends on what subject you want to teach. I've heard that there are more positions available for math and physics teachers as opposed to something like English. Do you know if that's true?
I actually don't know what the job situation is like. I've heard that also, that there is a demand for math teachers. I think there's also a demand for diversity in education. So they're looking for people of color, LGBTQ, those types of teachers to reflect the different diversities in the classroom. But I don't know.
Nice.
When you say you really have to push for it and you really have to show your passion and meet the principal, what does that look like in a more like quantitative checklist kind of sense?
So I guess when I graduated Teachers College, I was determined and motivated to get a job teaching, and I have a passion to help students. And So I really wanted to go down that pathway. I visited all of the schools in Halton. I brought my resume. I introduced myself to all the principals. I asked people to give me mock interviews. I volunteered in classrooms. I sat in with teachers. I watched them teach. I gave extra help to students in the morning and at lunch, even though I wasn't an employee with the board. I went through the process to get a criminal record check to be able to do that. So I really pushed to get my face and my name out into the community in which I wanted to work. I don't know if that was helpful. I can only expect.
Because you're one data point, so
Well, and I don't know what other people were doing to get jobs at the time.
Right.
I know the job market was tough when I applied, and I feel that I got lucky. But I also put in a lot of work and a lot of hours and time, which didn't earn me any money, in hopes to actually obtain a job at some point.
Right. And I guess that kind of ties in well into the next thing that we wanted to talk about, because you mentioned, I think several times now, that you were really passionate about helping students, and especially through your tutoring work, you found that you enjoyed helping students one-on-one. So when you initially went into your undergraduate degree, you were studying biochem and genetics. Kind of at that time, what were you envisioning for your future career? And we're kind of going to walk through your step process from that point to where you are now.
Okay, so during undergrad, I really enjoyed the epigenetic portion of my studies. At the time, epigenetics was novel. People were just starting to learn about it. They were learning about how the DNA itself doesn't actually allow someone to express their genes or make someone who they were, but rather there were additional marks on your DNA that allowed people to express genes and allow people to be unique in their own ways. So that was just coming out, and that was the leading research at the time. At that time, I figured that I always wanted to go into academia, and I wanted to be a university lecturer. I didn't know if I wanted to do the research component, but I thought that I could see myself teaching students about epigenetics, and I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to be at the forefront of that knowledge and share that with other students. So after undergrad, I felt that in order for me to get a job at a university, I needed to do a master's. So I did my master's of science, and I did it in epigenetics of telomeres. So telomeres are the ends of your chromosomes, and we were looking at how the marks on your ends of your chromosomes help regulate the length of your chromosome, because we know that chromosome length is important in allowing cells to stop dividing, and when that's disrupted, that leads to cancer. So I was really looking at the epigenetic effects on the ends of your chromosomes and how it regulates cancer. And I thought, this is something I could do for the rest of my life. I could lecture on this. I love that idea. Cancer, epigenetics, that kind of tied in all of my interests. And as I worked through my master's, I did not enjoy the research component at all. The hours were long. I didn't enjoy working on human stem cells or human cell lines and working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, essentially. So I figured at that point, I needed a break. I wasn't going to do a PhD, and I didn't really know what my options were. So I took a year off after my master's, and I explored 2 different career paths. I looked at teaching high school, and I was looking at genetic counseling. I thought it was really interesting at the time. So I was volunteering in 2 different genetic counseling clinics. So one was at McMaster in the prenatal genetic counseling clinic. So they deal with pregnant moms who have abnormal ultrasounds and what the result of that pregnancy might be. So they test for things like Down syndrome or other chromosomal defects or other issues with the baby, and they deliver that news. And then I was also working in a cancer genetic counseling setting. I thought that would be right up my alley because that was genetics and cancer, put everything together for sure. And so I sat in on a bunch of sessions, and I found it extremely depressing. And I didn't want to be the person delivering information telling you that, yes, you have a higher susceptibility to developing breast or ovarian cancer, which are the most common cancers that they deal with, or whatever type of cancer you're looking at. And I didn't want to deliver bad news to people all day long. So at that point, after I had done my applications, I decided I didn't want to go down that pathway. So while I was volunteering in genetic counseling clinics, I was also doing tutoring on the side. And I was helping high school students in math and science obtain their credits. And it was mostly math because science students don't need that much additional support. They just have to go home, memorize the content. They usually do well on their tests. So it was mostly
can
math.
confirm.
Yeah, it was mostly math where students needed that one-on-one help. And that was where I developed the connection with my students. I saw the growth in my students, and I realized that this was something that I could do forever, and I was really enjoying it, and I loved helping them. And so then I went to Teachers College, and the rest is history.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Maybe you could just give us a quick overview of what does it mean to go to Teachers College? In my Googling, I found that it's called a Bachelor's of Education. So is that the requirement that's required to teach in Ontario? So basically how do you become a teacher in Ontario, and what is that process like?
So to become a teacher in Ontario, I think it actually depends on what you want to teach. So to teach math science, you need an undergraduate degree. And I don't know if it's a 3-year or a 4-year degree, but you need, I think, a certain number of courses in the subject matter that you want to teach in order to be eligible to apply for Teachers College. When I went to Teachers College, it was a 1-year program and we obtained a Bachelor of Education, but I believe now it's a 2-year program for the same degree. So after undergrad, you do 2 years of Teachers College, and you obtain your Bachelor of Education that allows you to teach in Ontario. When you do your Bachelor's of Education, it's mostly classroom based, but you do, when I was there at least, we did 3 practica. So we went out into high schools for 3-week periods. We would observe the teacher for 1 week, and then we would teach for 2 weeks. So we had help teaching our first few classes with a supervisor. I think the way Teachers College is run has been changed since I was there because it's now a 2-year program, but I would imagine it's pretty similar in that you need your undergraduate degree with a number of compulsory credits in the subject that you want to teach, and then you obtain your 2 years of your Bachelor of Education.
All right, cool. And then, so you decided to teach high school instead of elementary. So is that also, and you also mentioned earlier on that you are qualified to teach grade 7 through 12. So I was wondering, is it during your Bachelor's of Education that you pick a stream and decide whether you want to teach secondary or elementary?
So when you apply to Teachers College, you apply, I think it's for primary junior, junior intermediate, or intermediate senior. That's the way they divide it up. And I don't know exactly what primary grades are, what intermediate grades are, but intermediate senior, I believe, is 7 to 12. So before I enrolled in Teachers College, I had to decide, did I want to teach high school, I guess middle school, or the younger kids? Once you graduate with your Bachelor of Education, you are able to take additional courses to allow you to teach other grades. So if I decided today that I wanted to teach kindergarten, I could take a summer school class or an online class for a few weeks to give me the credentials to teach the primary school.
It's good to know.
So why did you choose high school specifically?
I couldn't work with little kids all day long.
Really? Because I feel like you would be good with kids. I feel like you're very energetic and, you're bright.
No, I couldn't do that. I'd rather deal with the attitude than pulling up kids' pants to help them pee. I could not do that.
I mean, yeah, honestly, when I thought about teaching high school, since you brought it up, I don't think I could deal with teenagers all day. No offense to all the high schoolers listening to this podcast.
I didn't realize what I was getting into, but I do love it. I don't mind the attitude. I mean, some days are better than others, but I couldn't deal with those little kids. No.
I think in every generation of people, there's always your parents are like, kids these days do so and so, whatever. I think teachers are in the unique position of actually seeing kids these days change over time. Do you feel like there's actually significant or any changes over time in your teaching experience?
100%. When I started teaching, kids were not like they are today, and it was not that long ago. They took more responsibility for their actions. They were not they didn't talk back in the same way. I feel like as time has gone on, there has been less and less discipline in school or in the classrooms, and kids they know what they can get away with and what they can't. And so it's definitely changed. Technology is now exploding in the classroom, which makes it really hard as a teacher to control. But with everything, you're going to have different challenges and different problems as life goes on. And That's what makes it fun, right? So now I have to deal with the cell phone in the classroom that I didn't have to deal with when I started teaching in the same way.
Yeah.
It's just a new twist on teaching, and
Yeah.
it is what
Actually,
it is.
the high school environment did change so fast. I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me. When I was in high school, we never used an online management kind of platform, like
Mhm.
Avenue to Learn, like basically the university online management platforms, but for high school, I think it's Google Classrooms. We never used any of that.
And we don't use Google Classroom anymore. Now with COVID, we've changed all of that. So the technology in high school is rapidly changing.
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, like for my sister, all her courses have a Google Classroom or whatever it's changed to now. Like they have an online component, and it's just crazy because we're only 4 years apart. So,
Yeah, I think there might also be, like, regional differences. I know we went to school in different
mm.
districts, Lisa, but I know for Peel, like, they definitely did start embracing it, and even
Oh,
when
that
we were in
makes
middle school, if you remember,
sense.
like, we had a little bit of that.
That's
Yeah.
true. That makes sense. My sister goes to school in Peel, and I went to school in Halton. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, even then, I feel like it can definitely change quite rapidly.
Yeah, for sure. So just follow up on that, I guess. Like obviously technology has been great in schools for certain things, but also, like you said, brings lots of distraction, cell phone use. How do you feel about, the integration of technology overall in your classroom? Do you wish there was more of it, less of it? How do you feel about that?
So I think this is a pre versus post COVID answer.
Okay.
Pre COVID, I did not feel that a cell phone deserved a place in my classroom.
Mm.
I teach math. You can't learn math online. If you need help, you raise your hand, ask the teacher, ask your friend, speak to the person beside you. Texting someone isn't going to give you the answer. You can't Google the answer. Photomath is an app that students use to get a full solution of their answer. And I don't find it very reliable and I don't really like it. So I was not an advocate for technology in the classroom pre-COVID. COVID hit. We now don't see our students every day. It's the only way in which we can communicate. In our board, we're using Google Meets to meet with students online.
Mhm.
And I love it. It allows me to interact with my students, see my students, gives them an opportunity to ask me questions in a live manner. I use the iPad when I teach online. So I hook my iPad up to my Google Meet and I essentially deliver the lesson, speak to my students in the moment. So it's all live and they're able to interrupt me and ask questions. The only difference is it's not face to face. So technology has its benefits. It can also be distracting to students in the moment. So I think from a teacher use, the technology is wonderful. From a student use, I don't know how valuable it is.
Mhm. So thinking like in the, far, far future over the horizon when COVID blows over and we're back to, quote unquote normal, do you think your usage of technology in the classroom is going to change at all, or do you think it's going to go back to like kind of no cell phones?
I think post COVID, I will be better with the use of technology. So, as a teacher, I will change the methods in which I deliver the instruction to my students. So, I am now able to video record my lessons. So, I can always have a video online. If students need help with a certain topic, they can then go back onto the website, watch the video, and relearn the lesson. I have gotten better at presenting material through the use of technology.
Mm.
So students can use their computers or their cell phones to access that. But I still worry about the student who sits in the classroom on their cell phone or on their computer
Mm.
and is not using their technology in an educational manner.
Yeah, I think it's a very different question. Like, it's two very opposite things because there is the idea of technology in the classroom as a distraction, and then there's the idea of technology in the classroom as a learning aid. So it kind of is up to the student to be proactive about how they're going to use their phone.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps also when a teacher is like, "Please don't use your cell phone." It's like it's much harder to actually get distracted.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's a need for students to use technology in the classroom.
Mm.
Their friends are there. They have other peers in the class that they can ask. They can ask their teacher. It's more likely that students are going to get distracted with the cell phone in the class
Mm.
than use it in a proper manner. That's
Mhm.
my feeling.
Yeah, also specifically for math, like you said, you can't really Google things. It is like just a hard subject to kind of that you need to concentrate on, I think.
You're not doing research.
Yeah. Mhm.
Kind of jumping back to what we were discussing earlier with wanting to help students learn. I feel like most teachers, like you, go get their bachelor's of education because they genuinely want to help their students learn. But, and I've noticed this increasing over the years, is that students are mostly concerned about their marks, especially for grade 11 and 12, because it impacts their university applications. And these things are getting almost more and more quote unquote gamified. People know, oh, I need a 96 in English to get into this program and a 97.5 average overall. So sometimes there can be this kind of difference of goal between the teacher who's like, I want to help you really learn and become better as a person, and the student being like, I need a 95. So, how do you kind of reconcile your own goals with that of your students? And do you ever have any kind of dissonance with these kind of differing aims of your like your own goals versus your students?
So this is a very real problem that we encounter in high school all the time. And it's not as much a problem in grade 9 and 10 because students and parents always figure, oh, my student has another year or two before the marks really matter, so I'm not going to fight it. And then in grade 11 and 12, the student figures, okay, I'm going to buckle down at this point and I'm going to do really well. And in math, if you didn't learn the material in grade 9 and 10, it makes it much harder to be successful in 11 and 12. Students definitely push to get higher grades because they guilt teachers into giving them higher grades to allow them to be accepted into their program of choice for post-secondary school. And it's very challenging as a teacher because at the end of the day, I feel it's my responsibility to teach the student how to learn and to teach them the skills in order to be successful in post-secondary education, and also teaching them the curriculum required for the grade level or the course that they're enrolled in. So at Abbey Park, what we've done to try to combat this issue is that recently we have totally redone our courses, and we've tried to cycle the material in a way to allow students to better grasp concepts and understand the why behind things in math. So we don't teach in the order of the textbook. We might teach chapters 1 and then a little bit from chapter 3 and then a little bit in chapter 8 and then go back to chapter 1 to try to cycle the information so that students are always they're learning the same skills over and over again. As the course progresses, their grades are going up rather than going down. So we always tell students, like, on the first or second unit test, yes, your marks are going to be lower, but you're going to revisit this material again in unit 3 and unit 4. And when this question is presented to you later, you will hopefully learn from your mistakes, obtain more marks, and your grades should go up. So the students have to have faith in their teachers that we know what we're doing and we're really there. We're trying to help them. We're trying to allow them to earn the credit with the grade that they require for their post-secondary school. But we're also not giving grades away. And I'm not going to give you a 90 because that's what you need to get accepted. If you didn't earn your 90, maybe that program isn't the right program for you. And those are difficult conversations to have with students. And in grade 12, we encounter those all the time. And it's hard for some of those students to hear, but they're always welcome to repeat the course. They do better the next time they do it. Sometimes they just have to buckle down a little bit harder. They need to advocate for themselves, come in for extra help. But usually if they put their mind to it and they trust us and they listen to the advice that we give them, they're able to turn their marks around and maybe not get the 90, but they might get the 88 and then get a little bit higher in another course, and their average is still high enough to allow them to be accepted into their program of choice.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough decision. And I mean, I've been on the other side of it, like in grade 12, and I know a lot of my friends, there was discussion about, oh, like, I'm hoping this teacher will bump my mark from an 89.5 to a 90 because that's what I need. So yeah, it's definitely a hard position to be in, and it's something that I've considered when I've thought about becoming a high school teacher.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit that at the school you're at now, they've kind of done more experimental approaches to helping students learn math better. Yeah, have you experienced any other teaching experiments like this before? Have you tried any on a more personal scale in your classroom specifically and not school-wide?
So at Abbey Park, we do more departmental-wide stuff. But when I was at another school, so at White Oaks, I was working with another teacher to help students guide themselves through the thinking process a bit more clearly. So another teacher and I sat down and we created what we call the toolbox for students, so that when they were presented with a problem that they had never seen before, they would reach into their toolbox and grab some of the skills or some of the tools that they had to allow them to think about a question from a different perspective and maybe answer it in a way that they would not have in a previous year or prior to using their toolbox kit. I didn't find that was so successful. You win some, you lose some. I think it's better if students revisit the same material multiple times throughout a course.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking is always hard for students. That's always where the bar is higher, and that distinguishes the 85 from the 90 and the 95 student.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, but it's definitely a very real problem. And I almost feel that sometimes students are used to learning in a certain way. Going even from grade 1 to grade 6 to grade 8, you know that you do the lessons in school and then you go home and you do the homework. So it's almost like when you're trying a new teaching technique as an experiment, it almost has to be better than the previous one, not just equally good, because you have to overcome that barrier of the students being resistant to change because they're used to things being a certain way. And I think I feel this myself when I'm hit with a teacher presenting a material in a different kind of way, like, okay, we're going to do a flipped classroom. Yeah, I think it's interesting. And you definitely also want to, this is not the word I want to use, but I can't think of a better word. So you don't want to be like condescending towards the students, if that makes sense. Like you don't want to present them with a technique like, you're going to use your critical thinking hat kind of thing if they're in grade 12. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's definitely hard to switch up teaching techniques when they're so kind of cemented and it's been the same thing for a long period of time.
So this is a big difference between math and science, I would say. When I taught science, I would often integrate activities into my lessons on a regular basis. So we would play Jeopardy or do trivia type games. And that was really good for science because it's memory recall. Do you know the answer to this question or not? When I tried to incorporate those into my math classes, students struggled. So they take longer to answer the math question. They can't keep up with the game. They just randomly hit a number if we're doing something online. They don't think it through in the same way because the answer is not necessarily at the tips of their fingers and they have to work through it. I didn't find that those games were as successful. So for certain subjects, I think you can vary your teaching styles more. I think students, or at least academic students, so the difference between the academic and the applied stream, for academic students, they come into math class, they expect a quote unquote chalk and talk lesson, and then they want time to do their homework. The applied students, I think they learn more from those games. So when I teach applied math, I don't give the chalk and talk lesson, rather we do learning through exploration. So we'll play a game to come up with a mathematical rule, and then we give them time to practice. So I think it depends on who your students are, what their learning needs are, and what their expectation is. So the academic student really wants chalk and talk and time to learn, which is what you're referring to.
Mm-hmm. So kind of probing farther along similar lines of barriers to teaching and teaching techniques, have you ever felt that there are kind of barriers to students for learning? So one example that I can think of is that nowadays I feel that tutoring is becoming more and more common. And especially for grade 11 and 12 students, it's not uncommon to have a tutor outside of school, even if you're already getting an 85 or even a 90. So yeah, like have you ever felt that there are kind of systemic barriers that are preventing certain groups of students from achieving? And how have you dealt with that?
Lots of students use tutors. Sometimes tutors really help the student, and sometimes they cause a big hindrance. So classically, what we will see is a student comes to class and they don't do anything in class. And then when you ask them to pick up their pencil and start their homework, their response is, well, my tutor is coming tonight. They're going to help me. And I find that really frustrating because I'm there to help you in the moment and your tutor is there to supplement. So my worry with tutors is your tutor watching you do your homework, or is your tutor helping you go over the homework questions you didn't understand or the topics in math that you didn't understand and essentially reteaching you the lesson to make it easier for you to tackle the homework? If your tutor is reteaching material that you didn't understand or helping you through homework that you've already tried, I think that your tutor can be effective and helpful. If you use your tutor as a reason not to do work in class, I think it's a huge waste of money. There is lots of support at school for students, and I really feel that there's little need to have a tutor today. So at our school, we offer math help before school, at lunch, and lots of teachers will do it after school also. there's no need to spend money on a tutor, considering the amount of extra help we give at school. And we will sit down and teach entire concepts with students or help them through a homework question. Some students need that for security, but I don't think that they do a lot of good. So I would be weary about using a tutor, and I would use the supports that you have at school to help yourself or your child excel at math.
And maybe like how you kind of handle that kind of situation where students like, yeah, I'm just not going to work right now.
So when a student says, I'm not going to do the work right now, my tutor's coming tonight, I can't change the way a student thinks or how they feel about doing the work. I can call home and have a conversation with the parent and discuss whether the tutor is effective or if we're using the tutor in the right manner. But if a student has made up their mind that they're not going to do the work in class, that's their choice. And every student is entitled to do what they feel necessary in the moment. And there's not much that as a teacher we can do to change that. We are there to help and support students who are accepting of help and who want to excel. But if you've really put your foot down and say, I don't want your help right now, I'm going to wait until later, there's not much I can do in the moment. So I find it frustrating because I want to help and support those students, but you have to be willing to accept help.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And on what you said about there are a lot of supports available for students, not only are those supports free, but those supports are better than your tutor because these are coming from the teachers that are actually involved at the school. They know how the school goes about these things. And a lot of the times, if you're going to your own teacher, they are going to be the one who is marking your quiz. So they're going to know exactly what you need to be doing. So I've definitely worked with students where I almost feel like my presence, it's more like to help, like to force them to do the work because this is a paid session and so they have to do it. And I've also worked with students where I feel like I'm genuinely a supplement to them in that they're coming to me with like specific questions and specific concepts that they want me to help them go over. So the next question we wanted to ask, and again, going along the same lines, when I was in high school, I really felt that I had great science teachers. And this isn't just me buttering you up.
You did have good science teachers. The science department at White Oaks is excellent.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Okay, so it's not just me. They're so great, right? Mr. Persad, Mr. Patterson, I love them all.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, I would just walk into that science office like, hey, what's up?
No, they're a great group to work with.
Amazing. Yeah, you were like, honestly, I loved all my science teachers, like every single one of them in high school. And I really feel like that contributed to me having a passion for science and actually going into bio in university. And so I just think that's such a crazy thing because I've heard friends who are like, oh, I just never took physics because I took it once in grade 11 and I had a horrible experience. Whereas you could have another person be like, oh yeah, I had this one grade 11 physics teacher who super inspired me. And so I decided to study engineering in university. So it's kind of almost like these key butterfly effect moments. So do you ever just like think about that where you're like, wow, like how I interact with the student could impact the career they choose later on in life? And does that ever impact how you go about your work?
I actually have never thought about that. My goal isn't necessarily to look at students and get them to go into a math or a science-based career. It's really easy to motivate the student who is already motivated. So they're motivated based on grades. They want to learn the content. My goal as a teacher is to take that student that hates the subject matter that I'm teaching and to get them to come to class every day and to feel some excitement at the end of the semester that they've worked hard and they've earned their credit and they've done the best that they can do. I feel if I have done that with one or two kids in a class per semester, I have had success. I don't look at it as a bigger picture and say, I want a student to go into a math science career. I just want students to not hate my class. If you hate math and you can come to my class every day this semester and say, that wasn't so bad, I've done my job.
You just want them to come out being like, I survived and it was okay.
I tolerated Miss Asa. It was pretty good.
Aw, I more than tolerated you. But that was for bio, so maybe if it was math, I would have been like, it was neutral.
We're nearing the end now. Is there anything that you wish you had known before going to this field?
No, I love what I do. I love helping all my students. I love watching them succeed. in graduation and the graduation ceremony, we find out where they're going to school and what they're going to do. And I find it rewarding that I have made an impact, hopefully positively, in a student's life and allowed them to reach the career path that they're going down. And yeah.
As we wrap up, is there anything you want to add before we finish this up?
No, thanks, girls.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for chatting to us. I think this was a fun interview to do. And yeah, we appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
This episode is sponsored by Brittany M. Art. Brittany M. Art is a small business started in 2016 and owned by Brittany. Brittany is currently an undergrad science student with a passion for all things artistic. Her mission is to bring you high-quality art that is affordable, as art should be enjoyed by everybody and accessible to all. At Brittany M. Art, you can find one-of-a-kind art prints ranging from adorable baby animals to minimalistic nature pieces, all hand-painted with love. The art is available on a range of sizes and also as stickers and even on a canvas. They also love taking custom orders, so if you don't see something that's exactly for you, you can just message them and work something out. I myself have purchased the baby penguin print, which I printed out on cardstock paper to display in my room, as well as a couple mini prints of a handful of blueberries and a watermelon slice. The quality of the art is truly amazing, everything is very cute, and Brittany is super accommodating. If you use the coupon code LIFESCI, LIFESCI, you can get 15% off the whole shop. Check them out at brittanyMart.etsy.com or follow them on Facebook and Instagram at the links in the show notes. So how do you feel about that?
Okay, I know like after about half our interviews, I'm like, wow, this seems like something I'd be interested in. Maybe I should go into it. But like it's legit this time, okay?
That's actually what I was thinking about. I was like, she's going to say that she actually wants to go into this, and she does that for like every other episode.
Okay, let me explain my thought process. Hear me out here, okay? A lot of the people that we've interviewed, it's like a role that I didn't know about before that is interesting to me, but teaching math, like that's something I've thought about for a while now, and something that I really think I would enjoy. It's like purely because I don't feel like there's a lot of opportunity, or I'm just not thinking, or like I haven't really looked into if there's enough opportunity to do that.
Right.
And then hearing Talia's interview, I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't as out of bounds as like I thought it was.
Yeah,
I just think I'd be like really well suited to the job, just because like I feel like I'm generally chill and patient. So like the whole high school attitude thing that you were kind of saying was like not your favorite part about being in high school. Like I feel like I'm fine with that.
Right.
I also just love tutoring math, and like I had such a good time in high school math. Yeah, I would still be down to teach anyone now. And then also just like, you know, summers off are pretty nice.
I mean, like quote unquote off. Like
yeah. But even that's like so like it's not that I'm trying to not work in the summer. It's like I like just going somewhere cool and doing work. And yeah, like making lesson plans, like just getting that moment of like the person you're teaching understands what you're teaching. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like I understand that as a teacher or as a tutor, like the gold star moment is when the student goes, oh, and you're like, that is music to my ears. And literally me as a student, knowing that professors and teachers like hearing that, when I genuinely do have those aha moments, I like to like express them to like, you know, I want them to feel good because they help me.
Yeah, I feel like I could do it all day.
Yeah, I could totally see you as a teacher. I feel like I almost called her Miss Asa. I feel like Talia is to you what Jana was to me. In that you've been considering becoming a high school math teacher, and I have been considering becoming a physio, and both of those positions are relatively known and they're relatively accessible, seemingly.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, I'd say.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I feel like in terms of becoming a high school teacher, math is definitely not a bad bet compared to something like English.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we can talk a bit about the process that she mentioned of becoming a teacher, because again, we don't have a point of comparison, right? And it's one data point. She doesn't know if she would have gotten this position if she was less hardcore about promoting herself. But it does seem she had to do a lot and really squeeze her way in there.
Yeah.
In terms of going, like, can you imagine that? Like, if you wanted to be like a research assistant and you had to personally visit every single like company in Toronto.
Yeah, we also don't even know if that's what it was, right? She has a master's. We don't know what effect that had on
Yeah,
it.
that's true. That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe the region that she's living. Like, there's just so
Right.
many things that could be at play.
That's true. I didn't think about that. Like, the master's probably gives you an edge. I mean, I mean, I don't know. Regardless, I feel like the fact that she felt that that was something she had to do is probably indicative of it being a bit competitive. I've definitely
Yeah.
heard that it's a lot of effort to get hired. And it's interesting that you mentioned that being a teacher seems like it suits what you're looking for. Because one of the things that you mentioned that turned you away from becoming a professor is all the stories of people who have done multiple postdocs for years and still not gotten an actual professor track position. And I feel like I've heard similar stories of teachers who have spent many years on the substitute list,
Mhm.
and it's taken them a long time to get that position. But
Yeah.
I suppose that's also dependent on where you're looking for work and the subject you're looking to teach.
Yeah, it feels so different. Like, does that like not
It feels pretty similar to me, but I mean, like, for me, I think the difference is that with this whole substitute teacher situation, you're in the situation when you're what, 23, 24, 25?
Yeah, that's
Whereas
very
the
fair.
postdoc, it's when you're 35. So I think there is a difference there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I think when you're in your
makes a lot of
mid-30s, you
sense.
want to have more stable income, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely is good to hear that it's a fairly short degree. I mean, I know it's extended to 2 years now, but I think
Even
compared to
that.
a lot of exactly, a lot of professional programs, that's not too bad at all.
Yeah, that's like, you know, less than one postdoc. Just kidding.
What do you have against postdocs? Oh my gosh. What did they do to you?
They're just like don't make sense. They're just an excuse for people to hire like
You're right. They
underpay.
actually don't make sense. Like, I think maybe we talked about this in the previous episode that came out. I don't know. But like, I've told you about how I just, for years, I have not understood what a postdoc is. I was
That's
like,
because it's a
what do
fake
you-
position.
I know,
It's all a
that's what you
lie.
tell me all the time. I don't know. I think I still don't fully understand it.
It also doesn't exist outside of life sci because there's just so okay. Never mind. I'm not gonna go into that anyway.
This is not the episode. It's not
Yeah,
the
yeah,
episode.
we're not doing that here.
Yeah. I guess talking a bit more about the position, it does seem like another one of those things analogous to professorship where there are a lot more hours. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's probably at least 50, possibly 60, because what she said, she's at school from 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So that's 9 hours already every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that includes like a lunch hour, but you know, again, like math clinics, that kind of thing. And yeah, I just thought it was interesting. And you kind of mentioned this to me candidly when we were speaking on the phone last week. But a position might be advertised as requiring 35 hours a week, but you mentioned how in order to actually excel at a job, you need to add several hours on top of that. And I feel like teaching is one of those things where there's such a range of variation. For example, as a TA, if I wanted to, I could spend 2 hours preparing for my tutorials and make them amazing. But I'm only paid for 30 minutes of prep every week. And same with grading assignments. I'm given 2 to 3 hours to mark a set of assignments. And so I kind of mark within that time frame. But if I really wanted to go above and beyond with feedback, it would take me twice that amount of time.
Yeah.
So, and I think especially with a teaching position where it's not an hourly rate, it's a salary, you're probably not quantifying your time the same way that I am as a TA. Like, okay, they give me this many hours, that's what I'm putting into the marking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the other thing too is, okay, I feel like this has just become me defending why I should be a teacher.
I'm not coming at you, man.
I know you're not. This is like justification to myself. This is not for you.
Okay, you do that.
Yeah, so I was gonna say is that like the nice part of it with teacher hours, it seems like from Talia describing her schedule, is that it's a lot of like interaction time with students.
That's true.
Where like her 6:30 a.m. like tutorial type of setup is very much like helping students in a more, you know, close-knit community. Yeah.
If I was a teacher, that would be an after hours thing, by the way. That would be a before school kind of thing. I can't believe students show up to that. That's crazy. I guess because extracurriculars are after school and she doesn't want it to overlap, but that's
I used to wake up at 6 in high school. That life was great. Like you go to the gym before class, do your homework. Like it was nice.
No, keep telling about how you were going to the gym and doing all those things. I was like bleary-eyed on the bus just
Aw.
trying to survive. But yeah, I agree. Like I definitely enjoy the one-on-one interaction more. Like in my past tutorial for the course that I'm TAing, we were given the opportunity to kind of like interact with the project groups a bit more one-on-one. And then for one time, students finally took me up on my offer to stay after the tutorial ended and actually go over some of the stuff again.
Sounds like a pipe dream.
Yeah, exactly. Have a little bit of help with their post-tutorial assignment. I'm like, I'm so down, guys. Like, come talk to me. I don't want you to message me 20 things on Teams after, about 10 minutes after tutorial ends. Just talk to me. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely enjoy the one-on-one interaction. And I think that's why I like tutoring more than leading classes, perhaps.
Yeah, if any of your students are listening, she's pretty embarrassing in real life, so don't be scared, you know.
What do you mean? I'm also pretty embarrassing in my tutorial. Like, watch me forget the word for cytosine like a million times. Actually, it's interesting that this interview we did was with Talia about teaching, because I was just thinking the other day about this concept that I've heard of before, where the careers that we see tend to be the ones that we go for or that we think are viable. So an example of this is, like an example of this is opening a restaurant. People see restaurants everywhere. And so they're like, well, I don't think anyone exactly goes, oh, I'm going to open a restaurant because I see restaurants everywhere. It's more like you don't realize how hard it actually is to sustain a food business because you only see the successful ones. And I think that's the same for teaching. You only see the teachers who do succeed, and you don't see all the hard work and like the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into getting that first teaching position. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that's kind of why, one of the reasons why I think this podcast is a good idea, because it helps expose the careers that don't get seen, and so that people tend to not pursue because they don't even know they exist.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. Like, yeah, the thing about you only see the successful bunch. Yeah, that's you know, that's true. But I think also, no, there's really no but to that. I was just like, yeah, that's true. But I'm trying to separate it from the other thing, which is about like how you're more likely to pursue something that you've seen done. That kind of goes into how nowadays there's a lot of focus on like diversity in different roles and kind of making places more inclusive. I think that really aligns with that idea of if you can see someone who's like you in a position that you maybe didn't consider before, it makes you a lot more like, it opens that option in your brain kind of. So yeah, I think that's very related.
Yeah, I was super happy to hear her say that they're trying to increase diversity in teaching, because I think that's super important. I mean, especially at that age, you know, when you're 15, if you have like a teacher who you can relate to, I think that's super helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
But also kind of on the note of considering careers that you see around you, I feel like that's kind of been me in professorship or research in university, because we're just surrounded by research, and I almost feel like that's fueling my like, I want to go into research thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I like, you know how you have relatives that are twice removed? This is like content that's twice removed, where I was listening to a podcast, reading this article, but it was talking about this guy who did his graduate studies in physics and then thought that's what he wanted to continue on with. But he was talking about this culture that like academia has, where like considering an option outside of academia is almost nonsensical. Like it sounds, you feel like there's no other option except to continue down this research route. So yeah, I'm not going to say that like that's, you know, how extremely embroiled you are in this, but there is definitely this conception of academia or nothing else.
Yeah, it's hard because I really do feel like I am well suited to research. The other night I was actually looking at if I should take some anatomy courses in undergrad after all, because they are a requirement for physio school. And I was thinking, if I am really thinking about physio school, I might want to just take those courses now. And I ended up going on the physio websites for, I think, Western and McMaster. And I was looking through the courses that you do as a physio, and I just wasn't as interested. Like, whereas when I read about the research that's going on with all these cool new cancer therapies, that makes me really excited. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, for sure. There's also that element of like, I mean, we talked about it during the episode, like barriers to kind of getting to do what you want. You know, that might be health barriers, which is really unfortunate, but just like a lot of hoops you have to jump through. And so that's not even about the career itself being aligned. It's more of like these variables around the career that influence your decision, if that makes sense. Yeah.
To jump off that, I have a cool thing I want to share, which is, I don't think I talked about this on the podcast, but 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with this disability advisor, but not really disability advisor. I think she's more of like a career access programmer, supporter person at McMaster University. If you all don't know, McMaster University has a Student Success Center, and they provide students with support in finding jobs or editing their resume, things like that. And I met with her because I wanted to talk to her about accommodations for my thesis. Like, how do you approach a professor about accommodations? What accommodations do you expect? And one of the things that I really appreciated about our conversation is how real it was. I've had a lot of people say to me, and you see this everywhere, like, we want to include diversity, we want to include disabled people and all those things. But I'm here thinking like, okay, but why would you hire me if you have to accommodate my aching hands when you can hire someone who's equally as qualified but who doesn't have this disability? And the way that the coordinator person explained this, she was like, okay, if you can do the main components of the job with accommodation and those accommodations are reasonable, they can't disqualify you based on that. And that was so helpful to me. Like, in one sentence, it clarified what the realistic expectations are. Because, like, and the extreme example she gave was that if you're significantly visually impaired, you can't be hired to be a pilot. Whereas if they can buy, for example, some matting that can make it easy for me to stand for 3 hours, and they can do that for like $50, then they should do that, and they should hire me, and they shouldn't discriminate me based on that. So just like super helpful, like real life, what can you actually expect with accommodation?
Yeah, I'm so happy that happened.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't tell you about it. It was, yeah, it was great.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if this whole like barriers to learning thing, like if that gets further proliferated by this idea that, you know, academia is a meritocracy. And I feel like that kind of thinking hasn't gone away, even though there's evidence of like a lot of barriers for a lot of people.
Quickly explain what a meritocracy is again.
Yeah, it's just like the assumption that everyone who's progressing is based on like their merit, basically. And so a lot of times, like, professors, even though it might actually just be discrimination, they might see it as like, oh, like this person's just not cut out to do this thing, which is just like really unfortunate, because it might also be like a bunch of other factors, like maybe, you know, they're having like a lot of financial issues and like they can't, you know, also be doing this thing. I don't know.
Yeah, like I think finances actually make such a big difference in education, because if you're someone whose parents never went to university, they never did post-secondary, and you're just maybe working class or lower middle class, and you really have to support your own way through university. First of all, in high school and throughout university, you probably have to work some kind of minimum wage job, at least in high school. And that totally impacts your ability to focus on getting good grades and then get into a good university. And then on top of that, I think there's so much stress that just comes with knowing that you're constantly kind of like working to survive. Whereas some people who perhaps they also pay their own way through university, but they know that if they need a few grand, if they're just like in a really tight spot, their parents can help them out. And I think that makes such a huge difference. So yeah, definitely a lot of financial barriers in education. Talking more about financial barriers, I have not even a pet peeve, just a genuinely understandable annoyance, which is that I've had students either contact me through this tutoring agency I've worked through, or I've gone on Kijiji and seen so many job postings where, because of COVID-19, it's just students outright asking tutors to write their exams for them. Or they're being like, oh, I need your help from 2 to 4 p.m. this Sunday while I write my exam to help me with the questions. Like, I want you to be on the phone, or I want to be sending the questions to you. And there's 2 ways that's wrong. Like, the first way is that you're not being, you know, quote unquote, academically honest, all those things, you're cheating yourself, that concept, which, yeah, you should actually learn the content. But the second thing that bothers me most is that not everyone can afford to do that. And like, that's genuinely the thing that irks me. It's because not only are you being like, oh, I don't need to learn this, I'm just going to pay someone to do it. Like, not everyone can do that. So it's so annoying.
Yeah, it gets 2 more follow-up points. One is that, like, you have the confidence to be like, I'm not gonna do that, like, learn your material. Whereas, like, for, you know, each person that turns it down, there's, like, 3 more that'll be like, okay, I'll do it.
For sure. It's definitely one of those things where it's the tragedy of the commons. So it's the idea that if you do the right thing, you lose out. And the majority of people aren't going to do the right thing. I do like to think that most people would actually turn down something like this.
I have faith.
Yeah, for this thing, right?
Yeah. The issue is that sometimes there's also like schemes where it's very well hidden, where it's like, you know, you're an English teacher out of work and you can join this website that helps students write essays, but it's really just like plagiarism.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that's pretty scary.
Sometimes I'm just genuinely shocked at the audacity of these companies too, because
Yeah.
they will post on the McMaster University 2020 page like, hey, we'll write your essays for you, plagiarism free. And I'm like, how is this getting posted?
Yeah.
And I report it, but I'm like, how does this even, the nerves?
Yeah. The other aspect to your kind of tutoring woes is like that is very apparent in university as well, especially in first year. Like we had a lot of outside companies offer to teach a course in like a week or a day or whatever. And yeah, we had recorded lectures in first year, and one of our profs fully turned off his mic and was like went off on these companies. Because he was like, yeah, like I can't believe people give my course material to these companies so they can teach it back to you at like a price and all of this stuff. And so our university, pat on the back for them for actually stepping up and giving some free resources for this as well. So like some of these companies would offer like a learn, all this material in the short amount of time, or have like a review session. And then a lot of the profs would also have like TAs give review sessions and stuff like that. Or like make question banks, or like free online supplements. So yeah, there are ways to try to counteract this, but at the same time, like the university, the professor, they have to care, and that's not always the case, unfortunately.
I definitely agree with that. On this note, it made me feel better when Talia was talking about how there are a lot of free resources available, and that is totally true. I totally forgot about the math help clinic, which they also had at my school, and which is super helpful. It's a room where you go to at lunch, and there are just teachers there to help you. And she also makes a very good point about how a lot of these resources at high school that are available for free are higher quality than what you can pay for. And I can say this as both a high school student and as a tutor for high school subjects. It's because sometimes a kid will be like, oh, well, do I need to show all my work for this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm not your teacher. I'm not the one grading you. But if you went to the math help clinic, they would probably be able to answer that question better. But yeah, like you're totally right in that is dependent on the quality of your teachers. So if you are at a school where the teachers are not teaching well, or because of COVID-19, they're really dropping the ball, then the students who can afford to pay for additional teaching, I think, have an advantage.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Talking about the quality thing, I don't know. I have kind of mixed feelings, because on the one hand, if you're a company, you have the profit motive, so you really try to make your products good. On the other hand, you're totally right in that your TA, the professor, they know what is being asked of you, and they'll also be able to present things in a way that encourages kind of further exploring the content, usually, because they'll have like greater kind of frameworks for understanding a concept, and that's, I think, really valuable in terms of getting actual value out of your degree. So I don't know, mixed feelings. Also, I think a lot of people don't make use of the free resources a lot of the time.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
And I see this from both sides, because on the one side, it's like, they're free and they're resources. Like, what about that? It's not helpful. But on the other side, like, I'm relatively shy when it comes to reaching out. And I think actually this summer, like, COVID has helped that so much, where I'm like,
no, it really has.
No one can see my face. You won't know that I asked that dumb question in the hallway. So yeah, I've just been really showing up to a lot of office hours and like all this other.
Oh my gosh. That is one thing that is super great about online learning, is I find it is so much easier to participate, because you can participate through the chat and you can participate through talking anonymously. It's so much better. And it's so much better to raise your hand in Teams and wait for 5 minutes to be called on than to hold up your hand in lecture for 5 minutes. And eventually you just think the prof is ignoring you on purpose, so you put it down. That is one thing that I think is genuinely so much better online, is the asking questions in class.
Another thing that I thought was really interesting in the interview was kind of her mindset when it comes to teaching students. Where she was kind of talking about how you can't force them to do anything or learn in any particular way, or even learn anything. And that's something I really have a hard time with in floor fellowing. And I've talked to other members on my team, where it's like, even if you think something is better for a person, you can't actually make them do that thing. Like, you can't make them reach out for support. You can't make them like talk to a wellness advisor. And that's really hard, because I'm like, I really want to help you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I think this is the thing about healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, for example, as a TA, when there's a student who is not coming to tutorial, I can reach out once and see if they're okay. But beyond that, it's up to them to show up.
Yeah. It's kind of a struggle, but it's kind of interesting to think about it that way. And,
Mhm.
it does take a little bit of a load off for you. So that's really nice. It lets you
Definitely.
focus on other
Yeah.
students as well.
Yes, you definitely need to recognize that they are their own person and that you are just a resource and it's up to them to access that resource.
Last thing, hearts to my high school teachers, high school math teachers, science teachers.
I want to thank everyone for this award. I want to thank all the teachers who supported me I want to thank my dog, all my future golden retrievers.
Okay, I know you're joking, but it's so legit. Like, both of us have had such good high school teachers.
Yeah.
People think that, like, your success is just you and, like, what you've done, but not even close. Like, if I hadn't had, the privilege of being a student in some of those classrooms, definitely would not be kind of doing the things I'm doing now.
Yeah, for sure. It was super validating when Talia was like, you had great teachers at White Oaks. All this, because I was like, yeah, like I just had great science teachers, and she was like, oh my god, you did. And I think that was super, super validating because I genuinely just love so much every single one of those teachers in that science office. So
yeah, and it's like, an accumulative effect. Like, if I hadn't had, good math teachers or been taught well in elementary school to middle school to high school, like, I would have gotten lost somewhere in the middle,
I think especially with math, it is very cumulative, more so than biology.
Yeah.
I think it might be harder to teach yourself factoring than to teach yourself some bio things. I mean, I don't know. This has been another episode of So You Got a Life Sci Degree with Talia Asa about teaching high school mathematics. We want to give special thanks to our crew of lovely patrons, including our Little Leaf patrons Naeem, Daniil, Shafiq, and Shamima. If you would like to become a supporter of this podcast, you can visit our Patreon at patreon.com/soyougotalifescidegree. The music you're hearing is No Regrets from audiohub.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.